Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, the game, for the Game Boy. It sounds awkward. I don't know why they do it. Anyways. Coinciding with the release of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, the first one from '95, were a bunch of video games for the popular 16-bit and handheld video game systems of the time. Now, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie was handled differently on the various platforms. The Sega offerings, the Genesis and the Game Gear, opted to divide the game between following a brief portion of the movie and reliving events from the second season of the Mighty Morphin show. The Super Nintendo version was mainly a follow-up to the first Super Nintendo game and pitted you against putties and monsters from the second season, having little to do with the movie outside of the title and the final boss fight with Ivan Ooze, who served as something of a stand-in for Lord Zed in this game. I don't know, maybe he was regenerating or something, or he was too busy getting married. Wait. The Game Boy version, on the other hand, is something of a hybrid. While the game doesn't necessarily follow the plot of the movie per se, it does feature more elements from the movie than the other games did, which mostly borrowed from the television show. Aside from Ivan Ooze, who is once again the final boss, the game also features Mordant, a monster created for the movie, a Tengu warrior, a monster that never even made it to the other games, the Rat Creature, which was intended to be in the movie but was ultimately dumped and instead used on the show in the 3-part episode Return of the Green Ranger, the one where the White Ranger fought the Green Ranger in a less than stellar battle. But I digress. And most notably, the Rangers are playable in both Ninja Ranger garb and the more armor-like movie suits as opposed to the more well-known spandex TV show suits that were used in the other games. This is especially evident with the helmet shots, which are modeled more after the movie versions than the TV ones. All of this results in a Game Boy game that closely matches the tonality of the movie, if nothing else, and makes it something of a unique Power Rangers offering, for the time at least. So let's get to the game itself. When you first start off, you get to pick a level to challenge. There are 5 levels accessible from the start, with a 6th unlocked once you clear the rest. I generally go with Mordant, Tengu, Rat, Goldar, and Lord Zed, but the truth is you could go any order you wish. It really doesn't matter. It's sort of like Mega Man, except without the ability to steal boss weapons, which would have made the game a little cooler, but I digress. Once you pick a stage, you pick a ranger. Some rangers jump higher, others hit somewhat harder, but for the most part, they all play the same way, and unless you're playing this on a Super Game Boy, which adds more color, it really doesn't matter. You start the game off in Ninja Ranger garb and can perform basic punches and kicks. As you defeat putties and other enemies, you'll slowly build up your power meter. Once the meter's full, you press select to morph into your ranger suit and get a spiffy new dash attack and more attack power. If you desire, you can go through the level in Ninja Ranger garb, but once you reach a certain point, the game will force you to fight putties forever until you morph before you meet up with the stage boss. Power Rangers the movie on Game Boy takes its cue from the original Mighty Morphin game for Super Nintendo, essentially a side-scrolling beat-em-up with platforming elements. While you don't have any exceptional moves such as wall jumping or weapons, you do have a bomb attack that clears the screen or damages a boss when you fill your power meter in morphed form. For the most part, the game plays rather well, controls rather decent and somewhat responsive, but there are a couple issues that I've noticed. Specifically, the basic attack scheme is something you have to be wary of. The B button is your attack button and will cause your ranger to execute a punch or kick attack. Now I think there's a specific pattern to which attack will execute, and it's not something you could determine yourself with specific commands. This can cause combat in some areas to be problematic at best. The best example would be this particular portion of the mine level, where you'd have to destroy the barricade bit by bit before the putty crushes you. When you figure out the pattern, you can do this quickly enough, but sometimes you'll forget, you'll have a lapse of judgment, and it will happen, let me assure you that. And this will often do you in. God knows how many times I got killed here as a result of this. Also, at certain times, I've noticed a delay in the jumping. Specifically, I would press right and A to jump across a pit, because there are pits in this game. But sometimes, instead, I would just fall into the pit with the jump never having registered. As a result, I would have to jump straight up before moving in midair to the platform I want to reach. This is a rather lousy way of navigating a chasm of narrow platforms, and is certainly a sign of bad control issues. As a whole, though, it's not so bad, and it's not necessarily a contributing factor to the game's overall difficulty. And the game does pose quite a bit of challenge, whether it be from the bosses, the tricky platforming, or the irritatingly spotty collision detection that will have a hard time detecting collision of any kind half the time. That's something you want to underestimate in a Power Rangers game, which features lots of punching and kicking and relies on collision to get the job done. Graphic-wise, this is something of an improvement over the previous Game Boy Power Rangers, whose graphics were pretty basic and bland. Power Rangers the movie boasts considerably detailed level design, and the Ranger sprites, both in ninja garb and armored movie suits, look really nice, for the most part. The bosses look alright for the most part, and some of the minor enemies in this game are also neatly designed, but it seems they just recycled the same putty sprites from the previous game. Either that or they just rushed those guys out. I have a hard time telling whether they're supposed to be the Z putties from the second season or the old school putties that Rita used to use in the original first season. Oh well, in either case, the game's nicer looking than before, especially when played on the Super Game Boy accessory, where the color palette changes depending on the ranger you picked. Sound in this game's pretty average. Everything sounds like what it should, in terms of punches thrown, attacks landed, and whatnot. I kinda dig some of the tunes in this game, but sadly they butchered the Go-Go Power Rangers theme song. It sounds pretty dreadful here. Shameful. In general, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie for the Game Boy is probably the closest you're going to get in playing a game that matches the tonality of the movie it's based on. It has movie suits, it has ninja suits, it has some of the minor villains aside from Avin Ooze, and it doesn't try to shoehorn itself into TV continuity like the other Mighty Morphin Power Ranger movie games did. Setting that aside, the game is a tremendous improvement over the initial Game Boy offering, with more varied and interesting gameplay, and better presentation overall. However, the hit detection and lack of variation between the 6 Rangers prevent it from being anything more than just a good but average offering. It's a good game, but somewhat lacking. Still, it's worth a shot if you're into old school Power Rangers or the like. Give it a go.